Thanks for joining me. How you doing?
Very well indeed. Good morning, Stephen, and thanks for inviting me along today.
You're welcome. Thanks for joining me. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, Malcolm, and your adventures in insurance?
Well, it goes back a long way, Stephen. It goes back an awful long way. It's something like about 4 decades ago that I came into insurance. Um, just to preempt that, before that, I
Mm,
spent a number of years in the IT business, and I worked on mainframe computers, these things that fill a giant room.
mm,
And I worked as a programmer, as an analyst, and then as a manager. Um, I ran a computer center in Liverpool. I ran a computer center in Lagos in Nigeria. But by the time I got back from Nigeria, the whole of the IT industry was changing, and computers were getting smaller and smaller
mm.
and smaller. And I thought, God, this is the way things are going. Nobody's going to want these big mainframes in air-conditioned suites.
Yeah.
It's not going to. It's changing. And eventually, I got out of my employment, and I used the money that I'd earned from Nigeria to set up a software house.
Mm,
And we developed software for barristers' chambers and accountants using small desktop computers.
mm.
And I did that for a number of years, and I built up a company. We had about 20 employees. But then I got fed up again. And I just thought, whoa, hold on a second. A lot of the software has now been written. Computers are getting even smaller and smaller and smaller.
Mm.
So that, my iPhone is probably more powerful than any machine I ever sold.
Yeah.
And by this time, I had one office in the city for my legal clients.
Mm.
I had another office in Baker Street for my commercial clients, people like Pineapple Dance Studios,
Oh.
Stringfellows. We had quite an array of clients. And one night I went across, I used to go across to the Baker Street office once a week to take the boys out for a drink.
Mm.
And one night my manager said to me, well, how about making up a foursome? I've met two girls that work at an insurance office across the road. And I was going to take one out to dinner. Can you look after a mate? And I said, absolutely no way. After a pint here, I'm going home and watching Coronation Street, and doing my washing. And Nigel said to me, I'll pay for you, which completely changed the dynamics of the whole evening. And I was paired off with a woman who worked for a firm of loss assessors.
Okay.
And I had no idea what that meant.
Mm.
It was just blank to me. And she was a very professional woman, and she took her job very seriously. And she said that she helped the claimant with their claims.
Mm.
She said the loss adjuster helps the insurance company defend their position and make sure that no more is paid out. But sometimes that can be to the detriment of the person making the claim. So she, project managed the claim on their behalf. And
Yeah.
I thought, oh, that sounds rather interesting business model. And I kind of realized, Stephen, that as long as there was insurance,
Mm.
there was going to be insurance claims.
Mm.
So swinging back to my software house, I thought they're getting smaller and smaller, and you're still making the same margin, 30%, and
Mm.
they're going to sell these in shops next,
Mm.
which has happened.
Of
So
course.
I sold out of my software house and rather uh, impulsively went into business with this woman, setting up a loss assessing company. And that's what we
Mm.
called it, the loss assessing company. And I didn't fully appreciate the dynamics of the market,
Mm-hmm.
um, because loss assessors at that time were generally untrained, unqualified individuals. You
Mm.
could set up as a loss assessor within 24 hours. On the other hand, you had loss adjusters that might take 3 to 5 years to qualify as a chartered
Mm.
loss adjuster. So there was
Mm.
very much of an imbalance.
Yeah.
But I did feel it was right that the public should be represented because they didn't know what they were doing. I suppose it's some kind of Robin Hood instinct that I had.
Yeah.
And I eventually got involved with claims because I spent a number of years putting people's accounts onto a computer.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't an accountant, but I understood the dynamics of profit and loss, balance sheet, etc.
Yeah.
And I found myself readily adapting to business interruption. And we set up and we gradually grew the business and we got up to about 6 or 7 people.
Mm-hmm.
But the one thing I didn't subscribe to was the idea that loss assessors would chase the fire engines.
Mm.
They would then inject themselves into a situation between the client and his broker and the insurance company.
Mm.
And they would charge an incredible amount of money for not a lot of work.
Mm.
So if you've got somebody with a £500,000 claim and the assessor's taking 10%, that's £50,000 plus VAT. He's putting the claim forward. And despite the fact that I was knocking my own new business, I felt there was a different way of doing it.
Yeah.
And we're now coming on to the advent of loss recovery insurance.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I had my software business,
Yeah.
we ended up with about 121 chambers that we provided systems to,
Right.
barristers' chambers.
Mm-hmm.
And we would charge them an annual fee of £1,000 a year for a hardware and software maintenance agreement. So if anything went wrong,
Mm-hmm.
no cost. They
Mm-hmm.
prepaid it.
Yeah.
And I said to my colleagues, why can't we do the same thing with insurance claims?
Yeah.
That we charge a fee, and after that, there's no further cost. And they looked at me blankly, and I said, right, we're going to do it. We're going to do it. And rather naively, we kicked this off as a subscription scheme.
Right.
And it was going quite well, and brokers were beginning to sell it. But then, mysteriously, I got a call or a letter from the Department of Trade and Industry. They were the precursor of the FCA.
Right. Okay.
So, and I got a letter saying something along the lines of, Mr. Harvey, you are conducting yourself like an insurer. You are not a regulated insurer. Please stop it.
Right.
And I had to go to see them in Victoria. And I said, what do you want me to do? And they said, get it underwritten, get your scheme underwritten, turn it into an insurance.
Okay.
Which is what I did.
Right.
I had some contacts in the insurance world. And eventually, after a very long lunch in Fenchurch Street, I managed to get it underwritten by AIG.
Okay.
And that was the start of loss recovery insurance.
Right.
And it still met resistance, Steve.
Mm.
Because brokers used to say to me, Mr. Harvey, with due respect, we give our clients a cradle to grave service.
Mm.
And claims handling is all part of that.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't true, actually. It was just bravado. Because what, in fact, the brokers that I knew did, they would go out on day one, they would meet the carrier's loss adjuster, hold the client's hand, shout at the loss adjuster, then expect the loss adjuster to do all their claims handling for them. So it's doubling the adjuster's work. But then I spoke to people, loss adjuster friends that I'd made along the way, and they said, "Oh, Mark, we don't really need another loss adjuster looking over our shoulder. We don't really need that at all." That wasn't the concept. The concept was to provide the insured and the broker with a qualified adjuster who's prepared to work as a claims advocate.
Yeah.
And it took an awful long time to create a market because there was that resistance in the background all the time. But the big change came when we started working with the Federation of Small Business Insurance Services. And we fitted in with their ethos exactly, because they said to me, the Federation of Small Business exists to help small businesses at times of distress. And your product does exactly that. It helps the claimant at the time of distress. And they just started bolting it into everything They wrote. And that was when it all started.
So how long was it from the creation of the of getting it underwritten by AIG to that point? How long a journey was that?
It was 4 or 5 years.
4 or 5 years,
Yeah,
really.
yeah.
And how did it feel during that time? Did it feel like you were kind of, it was you're ploughing a lonely furrow, I imagine.
Well, at the same time, Steve, we were still handling claims ourselves on an after the event basis.
Right, okay.
And by this time, I was doing lots of work for risk managers, and I was traveling around the world looking at losses in the Far East Europe. And risk managers would pay us for our claims advocacy.
Right.
So the claims advocacy actually funded the early days of loss recovery insurance.
I see. Right. Okay. And how did you mentioned that in the early days when you first got involved in assessing that anyone could be an assessor. There was no barrier to entry, didn't need any qualifications. You just chase the fire engines and insert yourself into that situation. But how did you start to find people, adjusters who wanted to become advocates, who to level that playing field? How difficult was that?
Well, this came at a time when a lot of composite insurers were merging, and a lot of loss adjusting companies were merging, and names were disappearing. And the big new composites only wanted to deal with the big adjusting companies. And a lot of smaller adjusting houses were happy to work on the so-called dark side of claims.
Okay.
And we were very fortunate. Timing was absolutely wonderful. In the early days, we had an in-house resource. We did claims ourselves. I read avidly about principles and practice of business interruption.
Yes.
This kind of thing. And I just swallowed it and devoured it. And why would get like-minded people in but then we were fortunate we could have chartered loss adjusters working with us. And that kind of gave a level playing field, because you're not having a kind of a loss assessor down here and a loss adjuster up here. You've got two guys who belong to the same institute, go to the same CPD meetings, yet they're working on different sides of the fence. It's a bit like having a surveyor for the contractor, a surveyor for the developer.
Yeah.
And eventually they come to agreement on certificates, that kind of thing. And it changed loss assessing forever at that point. It was quite seismic. Yes, it was quite seismic, actually.
How so? Because they're coming at it from a place of kind of equal knowledge and equal experience, and it's more of an amicable process.
Well, it's a very collaborative process, because if you're both members of SILA, if you've got if you've got a fellow of SILA representing a policyholder and a fellow of SILA representing insurer, they're talking on the same level, and it's collaborative.
Yeah.
But I would qualify that by saying even today, I've got friends in the loss adjusting industry who tell me that they come across assessors who immediately shout at them and demand that they're taken off the claim, and they make complaints to the institute about them, and it's just a pure aggression. But with claims and with Lorega, I would always say to the attending adjuster on our behalf, tell the carrier's adjuster that you are being paid under a separate fees policy, and you're not there to hammer the claim or to squeeze everything out of the claim. There's no hidden fee.
How did that affect the dynamic between them?
I was at Bieber last year, and I was talking to a director of Crawford. They gave me one of their desk diaries, so I must have said something right. And he said, "Oh, Malcolm, we rather like it when one of your guys are on the claim, because your guys do all the heavy lifting for us." It's absolutely true.
They do all the heavy lifting.
Yeah, our guys do all the heavy lifting. They put the claim together. They manage the client's expectations from day one.
Mm-hmm.
You avoid table thumping
Mm-hmm.
because the insured has got a professional adjuster looking after his interests.
Mm.
And if he tells the insured, you're being too adventurous, we can't claim for that, we can't claim for this, but we can claim for that,
Yeah.
the policyholder just has certainty and they have assurance.
Yeah.
And that's the way that loss adjusting has changed, I think.
How easy or difficult was it for brokers to, when they're saying to their clients, they've given them the policies, they found the policies for their general business, but then they're saying, oh, but then there's this additional policy that could help you that we want to sell you. Was there any resistance, or did they typically encounter any resistance to an extra fee? Because claims is always the thing that kind of gets forgotten about. People often are just worried about price, or businesses often are just worried about price, and then there's an extra cost there. Was there ever an issue with that?
Always, there always was. But again, there was a sea change.
Mm.
I received an agency application from a national insurance broker who had an office in Manchester, and they specialised in plastic risks, plastic factories. And I thought, I'm going to Manchester to see that. I went to see the CEO,
Mm-hmm.
and I said, this is great, you've applied for an agency, but why have you applied for an agency? And he said, Malcolm, he said, look at my desk, I've got files up here. And anytime a claim comes in,
Mm-hmm.
I have to drop what I'm doing, jump in my car, go across the Pennines to Yorkshire.
Yeah.
Well, most of our clients are in Yorkshire, we're in Lancashire.
Yeah.
And he said, I spend a day, commiserating with them and making sure the adjuster's doing something. We don't have the resource for a claims department here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he said, by the time I get back, the files are up here and here. So, it's much better that I get them to pay another 150 quid or whatever it is, and one of your guys goes to Lancashire, goes to Yorkshire.
Yeah.
And that was a game. It was a sea change. Brokers different thinking.
Mm.
But from the broker's perspective, there was one of the largest brokers in Yorkshire who also sent in an agency application.
Mm.
And again, I went to see him. And I went to see him in Harrogate. And he said to me, Malcolm, in Yorkshire, we compete with Marsh, Aon, Willis, and at that time JLT on their home turf. And they all have in-house loss adjusters. Therefore, I have an in-house loss adjuster.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to send him out because I'm competing for the same level of commercial business.
Yeah.
And he said, the reason I come to you is because about a few weeks ago, I saw my claims manager, an adjuster, going out the drive. And I said to his people in his office, where's he going? Oh, he's going to Scarborough. There's a loss in Scarborough. And he said, show me the file. And this was one of their clients, a small shopkeeper who'd had quite a serious fire, 50, 60,000 pounds worth of claim, which was big for a small shopkeeper.
Mm.
And the adjuster had been there 7 times. And the CEO said to me, Malcolm, every time he goes out,
Yeah.
it costs me 250 quid.
Yeah.
Bizarrely, we only make 250 quid commission on this policy per annum. And bizarrely, he's been there 7 times. And on average, we only keep a client 6 years.
Right.
I'm never going to make money.
Mm. Mm.
Much better I add on £100 and one of your guys goes to Scarborough.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
brokers began to focus on the cost of providing a claims service.
Yeah. Yeah. So in the end, it becomes economical. It pays for itself.
It becomes, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so then so it sounds like you've more recently combined your initial kind of experience within IT and and then the loss assessing, loss recovery insurance. You've kind of combined them with and brought them together with claims.
With technology, yes.
Yeah.
I sold out of Lorega in 2016. I'd come to the end of my tenure with Lorega. I'd taken it as far as I wanted to go. I could see where it was going. I didn't agree with the way it was going, and it's gone that way. And it had such a big opportunity to go national. It never got beyond about 50,000 policies. And I just felt there was a bigger picture. And I'd said to my colleagues, look, I think we need to update the business model, because the business model we had was 20 years old. And we need to add in ways of truncating the claim for our policyholder and offering more service. I think it fell on stony ground, and I just felt it best to got to the point where I'm going to set up again. You buy me out and I'll set up again. And the whole idea of claims was to introduce new technology. And the first thing I found, I went to California and found the video streaming software, which is absolutely brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And we use it for doing virtual FNOLs. So if the minute the first notification of loss comes in, we can be on site in minutes. And we can start the journey. We can start the claim process. We can arrange for contractors. We know exactly what type of adjuster we need there, because we see the extent of the loss. If it's going to be over 50 or 100,000, you really need a top quality chartered adjuster. You need to get boarding up electricians, you need to get scaffolders, you need to get drying out. That can all be done within minutes.
That sounds quite transformative.
It's very transformative. On occasion, Stephen, we get a claim coming in and we have to tell them, look, this is only about 500 quid. Don't even worry about it. Just get it done. We've got the footage. We can show your insurance company the footage, but just get it done. Don't even bother about a claim. So it works really, really well. I was very pleased with our video streaming. That's one thing that we've introduced. The second thing we've introduced is that I think most people, members of the public who haven't been involved in claims, are very jaundiced about the claim, making an insurance claim. They know the insurance company is going to rip them off somewhere. That's in their view. But when you've got a chartered loss adjuster representing you, you ain't going to get ripped off. The other thing that happened that upset the public is that you can go for long periods of time without knowing what's happening on the claim. So we introduced something called ClaimStream, which is an online claims tracking system. So we give the insured, the claimant, a login, and he can go on to online 24/7, find out what's happening on his claim. And again, that was very transformative. So that's how the claims model differs from the Lorega model. We updated it.
And so it sounds like the overall kind of claims journey or customer journey is shorter, or at least, if not, they're more informed, because they've got the ability to see what the present position is at any time.
Absolutely. So satisfaction levels are much higher. But the people who are now running claims, Liz Latter is a very kind of inspirational woman. She scares the hell out of me anyway. And Liz is very much used to high volume, low ticket sales. And by the end of this year, claims will have the same number of policies that Lorega took 20 years to accrue. She is firmly focused on mainstream insurance. And we've got Liz. We have Simon Cooter as the chairman, who is the ex-underwriting director for personal lines at Ageas. We have David Williams, who's the ex-claims director of AXA, working with us. We've got some real grown-ups running the business now. And that will change adjusting.
How do you think it's going to change adjusting?
Well, we know that we need, for the moment, we've got adequate adjusters supporting us.
Yeah.
But our business is incremental, it's cumulative. And as we get more and more policies, we know that for every 1,000 policies, there'll be X number of claims. And this will give adjusters a chance to use their skills, not just purely for insurers, but working for us, working for the policyholder, and working for the broker.
Mm. Mm.
It will ultimately, if Liz is correct and we get to mainstream insurance, there'll be several hundred adjusters needed to support the product.
It seems like the issue over the last few years in the market has been that there's probably not enough qualified adjusters, and that all the qualified adjusters that there are sort of weighted towards the twilight years of their career, and they're phasing out. There's not been enough adjusters coming through, and I think that is being rectified, and there's a lot of training and investment going on into the next generation of loss adjusters to fill that gap. But if do you think it's going to cannibalize the adjusting talent pool a little bit from the insurer side over to the client side?
Well, let's just talk about adjusting in general first of all, before we go on to which side of the fence do they work. I always used to think there was something like 2,000 chartered loss adjusters in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
And I had lunch with the CEO of an adjusting firm in the city about a year ago. And I said, there's 2,000 adjusters. He said, oh, no, there aren't. There's about 900. I said, oh. He said, the problem that the industry has is that there are 30 new people qualifying adjusters and adjuster every year.
Mm-hmm.
But at the back end, we've got 50 or 60 retiring.
Yeah.
So we have a diminishing population of chartered loss adjusters.
Yeah, yeah.
And he said, that's the problem. He said, the only good thing is that for the adjuster's point of view, it's driving up their salaries.
Yes, very much so.
Because, for years I used to think, God, if I was a young man, would I want to spend 4 or 5 years qualifying as an adjuster and earn 40, 50K a year? I'd spend 4 or 5 years qualifying and earn double that as a lawyer or an accountant. But, I think 100K packages are now kind of fairly normal within the industry. I know that the two main players, Sedgwick and Crawford, have dedicated teams looking for new talent. So all the top young adjusters are going to the two major players. But as we grow, there'll be more and more requirement for top players on our side of the fence as well.
Yeah.
So we're now drifting into what's going to happen to adjusting.
Yeah.
Yeah. My view is, I'll just rewind for a second on that, because when I first devised the loss recovery policy, we set the trigger point for a policy at a level where we thought it would become a problem for the insured, a problem for the broker, which 30 years ago was £5,000.
Yeah.
Big deal, £5,000. Now it's the price of an Hermes handbag, But 30 years ago, it was a gantry of cigarettes, so, the front of the shop smashed in, big headaches. But 30 years ago, £5,000, if you increment that to today's level, it's about £15,600. So, that's where you need an adjuster.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think insurers still send out adjusters on £5,000 claims, which is bonkers, really. Because I always say to people, well, it's a bit like having a barrister on a parking ticket. It's complete sledgehammer to crack a nut. So I think loss adjusters come into their own when you have major and complex losses. Now, major and complex losses have different meanings to different people. A 20k loss to a shopkeeper is major and complex.
Of course.
It's nothing to a corporate.
Yeah.
But I think technology will handle higher and higher levels of claims.
Yeah.
The insurance companies don't need defense mechanisms for small claims at that level. They do a lot in-house anyway. But there'll always be a requirement for a professional guy to go out on a major and complex loss and advise the policyholder what to do, how to mitigate the loss, how to overcome the problems. Most of the commercial losses we deal with the CEO or the FD. They're very professional in their own field. But when it comes to something like the factory's gone up in smoke, different set of skill set, different skill set. So our adjusters on our side of the fence become almost like a non-exec director, advising them on insurance claims for the duration of the loss. And that's the way we do it. And I think that also happens with the carrier's adjuster as well. A lot of adjusters that I know who specialize in major and complex, they take the same attitude. We joined the insurance management team for the period of the loss. Yeah.
That's a great way of describing it that I've not heard it before, but yeah, that's
so nice. I think there will always be a requirement for experienced people to get feet on ground and get in there quickly. There will always be claims. Going back to what I said half an hour ago, as long as there's insurance, there's going to be claims. There's always going to be complex and major losses. We've got changing in climate. We've got cat events that used to be once every 50 years and once every 10 years. Now it's every other year, flooding, etc. So
how do just on that, Malcolm? How do with increasing flooding, increasing cat events? I think the market is already under a bit of strain from that, or quite a lot of strain from the frequency of those events. How does it manage those going forward, do you think?
Well, I can't talk from insurers' perspective.
Of course, yeah.
But on my side of the fence, we have to juggle the premium income coming in against our requirement to provide service. And we meet on a regular basis with our underwriters because they want to be sure, because they're putting their name to our product, they want to be sure that we could meet demand in a surge event. So we have quite sophisticated tables of how many adjusters we've got, how many claims they can handle. Can we move them from one district to another? Yes, we can. And as I said, we are very fortunate by way of the fact that for every 1,000 policies we sell, we know how many claims are going to be.
Yeah.
So, as our book grows bigger and bigger and bigger, we know we need more people.
Yeah. So, and at the moment it operates on, you've got like a panel of self-employed adjusters or freelance adjusters who will pick things up for you as and when.
That's right, yeah. And some of them still work for the carrier, some of them still work for insurers. They're happy to work for us because they like our business model. There's complete transparency. They're paid a fee by our policy. They don't have to tap the insured for 10% of this settlement. There's no requirement for them to go and get some kind of referral fee from contractors or this kind of thing. It's just open and transparent, and that does affect the way the claim is conducted.
Yeah, I mean, I think rightly or wrongly, there's been a perception from loss adjusters that there's somewhat of a stigma to go and work on the other side, and I think that probably aligns with the reputation of some loss assessors. We're going back to barrier to entry and things like that, but also the the way that the model is funded, and it sounds like with the loss recovery insurance that that hurdle's removed for them.
Completely. It's open and honest from day one. So I think there's a very good future for loss adjusters, whichever side of the fence you work on.
Yeah, there'll always need be extra value in the loss adjuster going out and providing the guidance, soft skills, relationship building, coordination, especially at the kind of major loss level. Yeah. So what's next for you, Malcolm? More shooting or sailing?
More sailing. Sailing between shooting seasons and shooting between sailing seasons.
Nice, good. Well, I really appreciate your time. It was really fascinating insight into your career and also the development of loss recovery insurance and loss adjusting and its future. So thanks very much.
Right. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you very much.